Suddenly everyone else was doing it. Was it some copycat cultural meme thing she'd succumbed to? I'd have thought Julia, of all people, would do anything to avoid seeming unoriginal. I'd make some non-committal noise. I wasn't required to answer Marco, mainly just to listen, and not irritate him with comments suggesting he perhaps didn't acknowledge the full extent of the wrong done by men to women over the centuries, because he did acknowledge it. He'd just never considered himself one of those men, and even now, when his ordeal appeared to be safely over, resented the threat of being stigmatized as one when he'd done nothing to deserve it. At any rate, the speaker's anecdote about women suddenly discussing harassment en masse with their therapists clearly played straight into his suspicions about Julia's timing, even though that was hardly the point the speaker was trying to make. She was actually offering the report as a sign of newly awakening female strength, and I'm sure Marco understood this as well as I did. A silver lining to the cloud threatening the country in the form of a serial harasser of women having won the Republican nomination for the upcoming presidential election. Marco had grown up in the same London world as I had. His father was a barrister, and the family belonged to the same circle of professionals and artists as mine, left-leaning bourgeois bohemians with large houses in Islington or Holland Park or Notting Hill Gate. He was a few years older than me, which meant we weren't friends as children, but I was always aware of his existence. He was one of those boys who exude a magical charisma of good looks and easy confidence that marks them in their consciousness of their generation as people to watch. He had a striking face, hawkish but Epicurean, with eyebrows coming in at an angle like arrow fletchings, giving his eyes the mirafuerte, forceful gaze of macho movie stars from that distant era, and strong lines either side of his slightly abbreviated-looking nose, curving out in a bell-shaped flourish around a firm set, but sensual mouth. His mother had been a model in Milan before she married, and his looks came mainly from her. From his father came the ruddy coloration of his cheeks, which added an appealing look of wind-blustered vigour to the general effect. We overlapped for a year or two at the same school in London, after which he went off to Cambridge, emerging a few years later as a precociously assured young talent in British television. Longish news features were what he first became known for, usually about political conflict and almost always pervaded by an atmosphere of danger that, intentionally or not, cast him in a glamorously intrepid light. His first big coup came when the British ambassador to Uruguay was kidnapped by the Tupamaros guerrillas. Marco's parents had a weekend cottage near the ambassador's family farm in Sussex, and Marco was able to get an early interview with family members, blinking in shock outside their oast houses a few hours after news of the kidnapping reached England. On the back of this, he got a commission to make a programme about the guerrillas themselves. Footage of Hector Perez distributing stolen food in the slums of Montevideo, along with a lingering close-up of the People's Prison, where the ambassador himself was possibly being held at the very moment of filming, provoked spasms of scandalized indignation in the right-wing press, ensuring Marco's success with the left and providing the formula for future triumphs. From the Tupamaros he went on to embed himself for periods with insurrectionists and paramilitaries across half the world. He was in Northern Ireland in 1975, filming a programme that upset even some of his admirers, when the actions he was accused of decades later were alleged to have taken place. The footage in question, of a young Catholic woman being tarred and feathered, had no direct connection with a private scene that occurred, or didn't occur, in Marco's hotel room a few hours after he filmed it. But a certain affinity exists between the two, or does in my mind, and I found myself thinking of both as I listened to the tweed-clad woman at the lectern speaking about rape and memory, imitation and repetition, while Marco sat nodding, frowning, jabbing at ragged chicken bones on his plate, tilting his face this way and that in his usual unguarded fashion, every word seemingly triggering some reflex of warm approval or restless annoyance. 2. His ordeal, as he'd taken to calling it, began with, of all things, a private message on Twitter. He'd never used Twitter for private communication. For that matter, he'd never tweeted. The only reason he had a Twitter account at all was to search for tweets about himself. He told me this with an only mildly embarrassed